It may have a different shape.
Oh. No, that sounds great. Well, thanks for visiting with me. I really appreciate this. I had gotten Sam Jones also talked to me about you.
Yeah,
you know
I had
Sam.
asked Sam about doing something on the radio ahead of our reunion.
Yeah, right. And he sent me some stuff about the reunion. And I'll tell you what, I will sit over here so we can look at each other. Yeah, how's that?
Well, I can get over here.
That's good. I just want to get. That's good. I just want to get this thing sort of close to you here.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's okay. That's not, it. Just doesn't have to be any closer than that. Actually, there we go. And that just picks up everything that we're saying. So well, you got a reunion coming up. What, next week? June the
Friday the 1st.
Friday the 1st. Yeah.
It was. We finally, after what I call the local committee, kicked it around enough that we decided to do it as simple as possible, and that is to we just went out to the Hilton, and kind of hired them to set it all up and the food and everything, and I've been writing letters, try to write one about every 9 months to keep the addresses current.
Right.
Over a number of years, and
so this is the 65th reunion, is that right?
Yeah, 1942.
1940, class of 42.
Right. So we're.
And Stephen F. Austin, that was the original high school of
that
Bryan.
was Bryan High School, and of course there were just 2 elementary schools. Bowie was on the west side, Travis, and neither one of them are now. Travis has been sold to St. Joseph. And Bowie, the building is sitting there. Apparently the school district hadn't found any market for it.
Yeah.
And of course then all the new elementary schools have spread around town.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah.
So
I was born over there on the west side. And so.
What'd your family do? What'd your folks do?
My father was in the wholesale grocery business, a company called Lawrence Grocery Company, which was in Bryan for a long time.
Right.
And he also got into cotton. He was a factor, I guess you'd say. He classified the cotton and displayed the samples and everything. The buyers would come around to his building and look at the cotton, and then they would make an offer, a price per bale, and at that time, prior to World War II, they also, the federal government had gotten into supporting cotton, and so he could make a deal with a mill or a buyer for the mills, or he could take what the government would pay for the cotton. So he was trying, for 50 cents a bale, he tried to get the farmer the best possible price.
Right.
And he went to A&M in the summers and took courses in cotton classing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
so you graduated in 42, so obviously the war was going on then, or participation in the war was going on then. So tell me about your service and when you got in. Was it after high school, or did you go to A&M first? Or shorten it as much as possible. In those days, you could play high school football until you were 18.
Right.
And
of course I started when there were only 11 grades, so to get to 12 grades I only went to school 11 years, so in 42 I was only 17 years old.
I see.
And the year before that there had been I guess 6 or 7 boys that played football, and then they came back and played in the fall of I get it straight, 41. And then they graduated, and a bunch of them have been in our class. We call them class of 42, and they were also class of 41.
Right.
So me and I can't remember. It was only about 3 or 4 of us anyway. Were in that category, and I was dying to play. I'd been a scrub all my high school career, and so did that. You could, if you didn't take your last English course, they couldn't graduate you.
Right.
So I didn't take it in the spring of '42, and then that fall I came back, and I think I took English and typing and speech in high school, and
so you could play football.
Played football, and I was the first T formation quarterback in Bryan High School.
I'll be darned.
But anyway, we so I got out in January at that time.
Right. As soon as football was over, and
the semester went, in those days went to January rather than ending before Christmas holidays. So, but I got out in January and started A&M. In the meantime, I had decided I wanted to be in the Navy, and I had a friend who was in school with me, and he was working for the railroad, and he had eye problems, and I was nearsighted, and we'd go to Houston and try to get in the Navy, and they wouldn't get us in. But then about the end of that spring semester at A&M, I found out one day that everybody being drafted that day were being put in the Navy down in Houston. So I went to the draft board and asked for my papers, and my dad was able to and he drove me to Houston, and then I ended up in the Navy.
I see.
And,
so this was in the spring of '43.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
In June of '43, I went into to the Navy and went to Williamsburg, Virginia, for what they call boot camp. And I was placed in the Naval Construction Battalion, in the Seabees.
You were Seabees, okay.
And so when I got through with boot camp, then I was assigned to a battalion, and we had another 6 weeks there. And then they put us on a troop train, and it took us 3 weeks to go to California. We went up to Ohio, back down to New Mexico, back up to Salt Lake City.
Oh man, that was a ride.
Across the rock, right. Every day somewhere we stopped at some little town to get out, and they'd march us up and down the street for exercise.
Right.
It was kind of a weird feeling. But anyway, that was the way I ended up in California, and then finally down at Port Hueneme, which was near Los Angeles.
Okay.
And there was a Seabee base there, and then in December of that year, we got on ships and went way south and came back up to Australia, and sat in the harbor there for 2 months, and then in January or somewhere in there, we went north and to New Guinea.
I see.
And so we were in a location in New Guinea where we built piers for seagoing ship.
Right.
We built a training ground for PT boats, and we built several campsites for infantry units and that sort of thing.
This was at New Guinea?
In New Guinea.
It
was right on the tip of New Guinea, and most of the fighting at that point were up in the mid part. They had pretty well, between the Australians and the Americans, they had just about cleaned out New Guinea, and of course the other island fighting was going on, and different islands of the Pacific.
Did you have a specialty as far as your construction?
Well, of course, I was a seaman, and I started out as a laborer, and my crew principally built Quonset huts.
I see.
So we built large Quonset huts. We built small ones for barracks, and we built Quonsets for officers' clubs and all kinds of things. We learned to tie them together into enormous warehouse areas, and my battalion also, as I said, we built some seagoing piers,
Right.
and in this case we were in this big bay area there in New Guinea, and we had a base on both sides, and a lot of traffic back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the next year, then they loaded us all up, and we went to the Philippines.
Okay.
And we went into Leyte Gulf in the
Mm-hmm.
initial invasion of the Philippine Islands,
Mm-hmm.
and landed along with, I don't know, I think at one time there were 1,200 ships, and American ships in Leyte Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And we landed ours one day and stayed up all night unloading them because the fighting was right at Tacloban, which is the capital of the island of Leyte in the Philippines, and the infantry were still fighting the Japanese right there in town.
Right.
And so then we went in there and we got ourselves organized and established a base and began to build whatever was needed, including a PT base right across. It was more like a canal between the island of Samar and the island of Leyte, but I think this was the PT base where John Kennedy operated out of when he was in the Philippines.
I see.
But anyway, we built facilities for them to establish where the PT boats and that kind of thing went on. We built some large oil storage tanks, we call them, that were built out of sheets of steel.
Right.
And they were bolted together. I can't remember. There were several million nuts and bolts though to hold all those things together.
Yeah.
The joints were all had
Right.
sealed, and that's what we were working on when the Japanese finally surrendered.
Right. 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 So when you were in the Leyte Gulf and building, you say the fighting was going on there. So you.
We could hear all.
You could hear it, and you had to duck and some,
all
I guess,
the shooting, and the captains of our. One of ours in particular had drums of gasoline, and he could just foresee a Japanese plane coming along and strafing, And
right.
so that was one reason we spent the night rolling drums off of the ship.
Right.
But from the standpoint of actual combat, we never did.
Right.
We had weapons and all of the infantry background. I actually had some infantry training in different times.
But I've always been fascinated by the Seabees. I really have, because one reason because people don't know. For some reason people think that it just got there somehow. The runways and the bridges and the Quonset huts and all that they were just there. Well, they weren't. You had to turn raw land into a facility to effectively fight a war.
Right.
and
we used, what was there. Of course, Carl was the rock around all those Pacific islands, and we excavated Carl and made airstrips from it.
Right.
People didn't know it, but also Carl had to be kept wet.
Exactly.
Or it came apart. So
how did you excavate coral? How did?
Well, we had some sizable drag lines, 2 and 3 cubic yards.
Right.
At that time, a 3-yard machine was large. Nowadays, it's considered a small one. But they could just cast out into the water itself
and just drag it up off the ocean floor.
Right. And
then what would they do to it to make it smooth or flat? I mean, because it comes up pretty sharp stuff. I mean, it's sharp rock, right?
It was much like crushed stone when it came up, and the use of a lot of blading and dumping whatever soil was available, to on the surface. And then of course they had the gridded steel plates that were used and they used a lot of that.
Were you involved in runway construction too, or
Very little. No.
Yeah. But that was, I get. But your unit, did your unit do some of that, or?
Yeah, our unit.
Right.
Our unit. As I said,
Yeah.
we did various things. We salvaged some small scale railroad rail and cut them up and made trusses out of them for buildings that we built over there.
Right.
And immediately, I guess war is a big supply and demand is a big important thing, and so that was one of the things the Seabees constantly were building were warehouse facilities because the ships were coming in all the time and unloading all of this material.
Right, and you had to have some place to store it.
That's right.
That someplace that it was safe, that the enemy couldn't just find it too. You're going to be only the second Navy Seabee that I've had on the show, which is amazing. That you'll be only the second one. The other one is, I don't know if you know him, a fellow named James Rothermel from Brenham. Do you know him?
James Rothermel.
Mm-hmm. He was in the education business after he got out of the war. And
I knew James. I knew a couple of Rothermels over there.
Really?
Actually.
Yeah, there's a bunch of Rothermels over in Brenham.
Right.
This is James Rothermel. He was a Navy Seabee. Yeah.
They were road hammers.
Right.
But
so you were in the Philippines when the war ended?
I was there when the war ended.
Right.
And at that point, we had a choice, to volunteer for occupation duties or sign up to go home.
Right. What'd you do?
I signed up to come home.
So you had been at sea, or you had been overseas from?
Yeah, from December of '43
right.
Into late '45. In fact, I got back. We got back to California in December of '45.
So you're just almost right at 2 years.
Yeah.
And
I had a 30-day leave, so I hitched a ride to Texas and stayed home, and then they were beginning to discharge people already. I wasn't aware of that at that time, so I had asked to turn in the Naval Air Station in Dallas after the 30 days, and so I went up there, and then they sent me to New Orleans, and I stayed there a week, and then they sent me to Camp Wallace. And so I got out and was able to start the A&M about 2 weeks after the semester started.
Okay.
And they let me register and go ahead and start
in
back.
In 46?
46, yeah.
I said you started back.
So I was in the class of 47 at A&M by starting in 43, but I got out in 1950.
1950, okay. But your class of 47, that was your original class, right? And you played baseball at A&M?
Yeah, I was on the team or on the squad 1 year. That was a 12th man deal. Marty Perot was the coach, and they sent announcements in the battalion and everything that he was short-handed that year, and about 200 of us showed up over there. But you couldn't play freshman.
Right.
And so Marty took us infielders, and the assistant somewhere went to the stadium with the outfielders, and we worked out for, I guess, nearly 2 weeks every afternoon, and every day he would drop off some guys, and so there were about 4 of us anyway that he kept us on the squad. So I didn't play much, but I made a few trips and enjoyed being there. Stan Holmig was on that team, and Wally Moon. And so it was an interesting time.
Yeah.
He had a hotshot freshman team that year, so the next spring, which was my last, I was a senior then, but he didn't need us guys any longer. So. But it was an enjoyable experience, and then I went to Brenham with the highway department and played semi-pro ball over there.
Okay. Well, you weren't that bad then. You kept playing ball.
Oh yeah. I played ball up. I think when I was 65, I pitched slow pitch for our church team. And I had my son, played Little League and teenage baseball. And
right. So you played semi-pro in Brenham?
Yeah.
For the highway department?
No, the Brenham Lions was a long-time semi-pro team over there.
Yeah.
It was primarily local ball players, except they would bring in a couple of college pitchers and people like that.
Yeah.
And the city would work them for the summer, and
right.
they would play ball with us. But there were other college players, like, I shouldn't use names probably, but anyway, like Wally Moon and some of them, who played for different teams nearly every week,
right.
because they were excellent ball players, and they were really people wanted
What
to
position
play.
did you play?
I played shortstop and second base.
Okay, so you were an infielder. You were a middle infield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had.
You swing a pretty good bat?
No.
No?
No, every once in a while, but I was pretty fast, and I was able to sometimes to beat out some of those weak ground balls. But
right.
We anyway, my brother-in-law was one of the players on that team, and through him I met my wife.
I see. How long have y'all been married?
56 years this year.
I see.
I think. Let's see.
Y'all got married in.
We got married in 51. I'm trying.
Okay.
This year would be 6 years. Yeah.
When did you get married? In what?
In November.
Yeah.
So this year would be
years this November.
56 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Was she a Bryan girl, or was
No, she was a Brenham girl.
Oh, she was from Brenham. So you met her when you were playing.
I met her playing. Yeah, I say her brother played ball.
Uh-huh.
She had 3 brothers, and they were all ball players. But at that time, the youngest one of them was playing ball for Brenham Lions, and so through him I met her. And
what's your wife's name?
Madeline.
Madeline.
Yeah.
That was my aunt's name. It's a beautiful name.
Right.
Now, so what was your career after you finished school?
Well,
what was your business?
I graduated as a civil engineer, and so I went to work for the highway department in Brenham. We had what they called at that time resident engineers. I think now they call them area engineers. But he had the engineer in charge over there had Washington County. He was an older man who had been employed with the department for a long time, but so I went to work with him and did a lot of drafting work, and then we began to we were primarily building foreign market roads, but then US 290 got where it needed more expansion, and so we worked around that and got started on 290 that goes around Brenham now. I don't know whether you're familiar with it over there.
Yes, sir.
And that was first time anybody had ever talked to those people about 300 foot wide right of way. It made interesting public hearings.
I bet it did.
And then in 1958, Mr. C.B. Thames was appointed district engineer here in the Bryan district, and his assistant was taken to Lubbock as the engineer, and so he brought him a man, Joe Hanover. You probably know Joe Hanover, and from Hearn as his assistant, and then they transferred me over here as the district construction engineer.
Right.
So I did that for 29 years.
I can remember traveling 290 when I grew up in San Antonio.
Oh, yeah.
And my grandparents lived in Beaumont. So before there was ever not Interstate 10, I remember 290 was the way you
come up through Brenham.
You come up through Schulenburg and Brenham. Used to go through Schulenburg and eat at Bob Adamczyk's Cafe, and yeah, through Brenham, and I guess through Hempstead and on into Houston and Beaumont. Yeah.
Well, that's true. That was.
Yeah. I remember that over. So your love of construction that you got in the Navy, that's sort of.
That's what it was. When I started in '43, I thought my degree plan would be architectural engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, A&M, after the war, then they didn't offer that as a degree. I read somewhere recently about someone from another school somewhere who had an architectural engineer degree. So I guess in some universities it's still offered.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and after being in the Seabees and things, I decided I'd just continue in that field as in civil.
Yeah.
And so, and then I got out and found out that I had a friend who was working out here for the highway department in the district headquarters, and found out that they wanted the man in Brenham to hire somebody. So I went over there, and the first thing he asked me is, "Can you type?" And I said, "Yes." I found out, well, he didn't have a secretary at that time, and he was doing his own letters this way, so I could type. But it wasn't long, we hired a secretary.
Right. So you lived in Brenham. Did you live in Brenham?
I lived in Brenham 8 years, right?
8 years while you were doing that.
We got married in '51, and then stayed there until they transferred me over here.
Right. And you stayed with the highway department when you were over here?
Yeah. As I said, I was a district construction engineer.
I see.
There were times in the way things shifted around when I was construction engineer and design engineer and right-of-way engineer. The district headquarters was kind of growing at that time. When I came over here, we had just getting ready to start the interstate in Walker County.
Mm-hmm.
And so this district had 4 counties over there. They had Walker, Madison, Leon, and Freestone are all in the Bryan district.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 120 miles of interstate 45 to build over the years.
Right.
So I spent a lot of days on the road somewhere over in one of those 4 counties.
Exactly.
But
so except for the 2 years in service and 8 years in Brenham, you've been in Bryan pretty much your whole life.
Right. I was born here, and as I said before, I went to Bowie School, and then they started the junior high school thing. So we were one of the first classes in Lamar Junior High, and then went on to Stephen F. Austin.
Right.
I was trying to think. I think.
What was Bryan like in the 30s and all that? I mean, it was.
It was Main Street.
And I guess all the commerce was downtown, right?
All the real commerce was downtown. There were family-owned convenience stores, little grocery stores around. My good friend and classmate Johnny Lampo and his parents had one over there, and there was one out on the west side, not far from where I was born. And a man named Charlie Ball owned that store. I remember that. But somewhere right in that period after I was born, Highway 21 was paved out west of town. So that went close to where I live, but Highway 6, went through downtown and out College Road, and what is now Welborn Road went by the depot, and
I see. Yeah.
Went out to Welborn and Milliken. It crossed the track a couple of times.
Right.
Went out that way.
Yeah.
my dad came here in 1923, and he said the only paved road was Old College Road. And that was the only place the young men had to race their, see how fast their Model A's and Model T's was
Now,
going.
College Road, what you're saying, College Road, that's what we'd be calling Welborn now? Is that right?
Well, College Avenue now, and
Yeah.
then,
Yeah, College Avenue is what comes straight up to campus
yeah.
through the Northgate area and all of that.
Well, College Avenue takes off there at the bowling alley.
Right,
And
yeah.
the Chicken Hall, and goes all the way to the railroad, and that hits what's Welborn Road now, but
Exactly.
Welborn didn't go down. That was College.
I see.
That's Old College Road, as they call it now.
Yeah,
That was College Road, but that was the only paved road. And Main Street stopped at 28th Street.
I see.
And,
What was Texas Avenue then? I mean, was there a Texas Avenue?
there wasn't. Texas Avenue, yes, was Highway 6 came Texas Avenue and went to where it curves down here at the, and then it went on straight
I see.
out what's now College Avenue.
I see. So that's where it
That
sort
was
of.
Old College Road then.
So from the bend, what they call
yeah,
to what we see now,
Yeah.
that comes up through campus.
Right.
That one,
right, it stopped there.
it stopped right there.
And when my dad was going to A&M in the summer, they were grading Texas Avenue. And he said when it was dry, that's the way he went out to the campus. But,
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know, but I remember some of that, but not a whole lot of
Yeah.
of that construction work. But when I got into high school and started driving, of course, Stephen F. Austin was on the south side of Bryan then, and Coulter Drive was the most southern street.
Right.
And
That's amazing. The Coulter Drive was
yeah,
that was South Bryan. Was
Right.
Coulter Drive. Yeah.
the boys used to chase rabbits with their automobile in the pasture behind Stephen F. Austin
Right.
in high school. But
So when you built this house in 1960, this was still pretty much
yeah, this
the
was
southern part of Bryan.
this was a brand new.
development.
They were grading across Esther over there. Those streets were all being graded when I bought this lot. There was a man, Madeline and I were renting a house, and we were looking for a place, and there was a man that owned this lot. He had a house planned for it, but it was much bigger than I
Right.
could afford. But he ended up, he was in the hospital,
Yeah.
and I guess he knew he wasn't going to live. Maybe he had heart problems, but he had it for sale, and
Yeah.
because I went up in the hospital with the agent for him to sign the deed.
Right.
But
So Texas A&M back then, when you started at Texas A&M, of course it was all military.
it was all
of course.
male and all,
Yeah.
all
of course.
military. It was still that way after the war, except us veterans didn't have to go in the Corps
Right.
or wear a uniform.
Right.
Prior to the war, even the physically and health disabled students, there were students who were permitted to go to A&M, but because of their mental ability, but they might have had physical, they still wore khaki pants and shirt every day, even though they were not in the Corps.
Right.
But then, yeah, it was. It was changing from the standpoint that when I started out there, I was in Milner Hall, which is right next to Sabisa, and it was large. It was it had crowded things where they put us fish in there, and there were three in a room. And it was a three-deck bunker. I was the smallest one, so I naturally got the top. But
Right.
but they were having to do that because they didn't have enough dormitory
Right.
space because I guess the war maybe generated a lot of
Right.
an increase in enrollment.
Yeah.
A lot of kids. Well, a lot of my classmates, they got in V12 as they call it, and they stayed in school till they got their degree, and then they became officers, you know, right there.
Sure.
But hard hit, I wanted to be in the Navy.
You want to be in the Navy? Right. Right.
And there were, you know, a lot of other kids in the same boat.
Yeah.
All of us wanted to, you know, we knew that nobody knew how long the war was going to last at that period. I remember December the 7th because I was up at my grandmother's and we heard all that, and my dad said, if this lasts long enough, you're going to be in it. In 41, well, I was 16 years old.
Right.
And he was right.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
he was.
Then by the time you got 17 and 18, you figure, we all knew we had to go, and then I guess it was decisions that everybody made in which direction they wanted to try to do it.
Right, right. So when you went to A&M, where you lived in Milner Hall, so you lived on campus?
Yeah, I lived on campus that semester.
Yeah.
And after I came back after the war, I stayed with my parents.
With your parents?
And drove back and forth.
Where did they live?
They lived over on All Lane then. Well, that's William Joe O'Brien now.
I see.
Right across from the softball field.
Right.
So I continued my ball playing. As soon as I got back, I was playing softball with teams, and then I played in the summer. I played baseball with I don't know what they called it. Now it's LULAC. And I was playing softball with our catcher in the Coca-Cola team was a Mexican boy, and so they got me to play shortstop with them. And
that was here in town. That was
we traveled around. That's where I learned to like Mexican food, because wherever we went to play, we ate it at a Mexican restaurant. But Brian was, we were on 26th Street on the west side, and gosh, I wish I could remember it. I can't even remember the number now, but it was less than 1,000, and we were just a block or two from any other residences on the west.
Right.
The east side went to Villa Maria, as far as just beyond Travis School. In fact, Hazel Drive was the last paved street on the east.
I see.
And of course, it went to the park, you know, and went over to where the Stephen F. Austin was built.
Right, right.
But all the businesses were downtown, including, you know, the grocery stores, the clothing stores, and there were, I was trying to remember, there were several drugstores.
Oh yeah, and there was a movie theater down there.
Palace Theater
was
the theater.
Right.
It was not after the war. Then the Queen and the Dixie were built.
So the Queen is Palace is older than the Queen.
Yeah.
Right. I see.
Right.
I see.
And
and I guess there was the movie theater across from campus then I guess, right? Because I've had people tell me they were in that theater when December 7th happened. So I don't know.
Well, you see, I don't know. The only time I ever went to campus was when they had bonfire.
Right.
As I grew up.
Yeah.
Until.
Right. Right. Yeah, because you were still in high school.
In fact, you know, again, this is silly, but in Bryan High School, when you got to be a junior or senior boy, you really didn't like Aggies because they were trying to date these girls in Bryan High School.
That's great. Yeah. They were stealing your girlfriend.
Yeah, right.
I see. That's a great point. I like that.
I was just, but you were talking about Brian,
Yeah. Did you go to Aggie football games? I mean, when you were in high school, did you go to them?
I remember Dick Todd in
Uh-huh.
Early 30s, my dad. And then, of course, when I got into high school, they started the knothole section.
Right.
So we all could go for a little or nothing then.
Yeah. Well, I guess Kimbrough played in what, 30 in?
Yeah, he was in the
39. He was in the
39, I believe,
on the championship
team.
Right.
And another memory that I have was that somewhere in that period, Franklin D. Roosevelt made a speech in Kyle Field.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And they were trying to generate what looked like a crowd behind him, and
right.
I think Bryan shut down.
Yeah.
And most of the people in Bryan went out there mainly to be in the grandstand because I guess
right.
they did the filming, and
right.
he was on the track in his automobile, and
right.
and they could make it look like the stadium was pretty full. But
yeah, I've had people tell me about that when FDR came to Kyle Field. Yeah.
But
well, this is fascinating. I'm just really excited about telling the story, especially of someone who having my second CB on. That's great because I just love to tell the story of CBs. It's not, it's not maybe the most action-packed part of the war, but it was so necessary and it was so needed and all that, And is that
we had a
CB
guy?
book?
We had a guy that had done annuals, and everything.
Yeah.
So he started collecting before we broke up, and those of us that left money with him. Then after the war, he put all this together.
Right.
And, see, there was my crew at one of those tanks.
Mm-hmm. Is that you in the middle?
Yeah.
Standing up there in the middle?
A little bit younger than those days.
So where would that have been taken? Would that have been taken
in the Philippines.
In the
See,
Philippines?
That's one of those big steel tanks we were building, so they took that one there.
Chief Lambing's crew, huh?
Yeah. Lambing was from Lufkin.
Uh-huh.
And I talked with him and met him a couple of times after the war, but he died a good number of years ago.
Uh-huh.
CB, well, the chiefs were usually crew chiefs, and then they did have officers, but the chiefs were, experienced construction men, and they were older when they went into the service.
Right.
They were already guys in their 30s, while 90% of our World War II military were people from 18 to 25, probably. But
is your picture anywhere else in this book?
probably. I was trying.
Do you have any other photographs anywhere from your service time or anything?
Yeah, I've got a
Are they where you can lay your hand on them?
bunch of stuff. I don't know.
I'm just looking for,
I see.
just a few things that I can take and scan. And
I can't invite you in here because my daughter and Madeline are getting ready for trying to have a garage sale.
Oh, I see.
And Sarah's been bringing stuff in from the country.
Oh,
That's why we're in here, not to live.
no, I understand. Okay. I want to talk about, we've got to talk about the reunion, not so much as the reunion since it hadn't happened yet, but this is going to air after the reunion. So you really can't talk about how the reunion was, but just the fact we may refer to reunion that you had in June, and that that it was something that you were really looking forward to and all of that. Talk a little bit about Stephen F. Austin and I just think it's fascinating. I don't think I've had very many people on that have lived in Bryan practically all their lives like you have. They can really talk about Bryan and about Texas A&M and sort of what it was back then, because you've already told me some fascinating things that I didn't know. And I want to talk about your military service and about the Sea Beast, because I I love to tell stories of Seabees. I really do, because it was such a, the war could not have been fought without Seabees. There had been no place to land the airplanes. There had been no place for the soldiers to live, for the military to live. I mean, Seabees were, it was you turn nothing into something. You know, it's
it was particularly effective, I think, in the Pacific.
Right.
War.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yes.
It tied all that construction into the Navy and the movement on water.
Right.
Whereas the Army engineers were primarily
right
involved in.
Right. Right. Because like when a PT boat came up, it had to have a place to dock. It had to have a place to land. And that's what the piers were for, and the docks. And it was you had to, to effectively fight the war, there had to be construction. And the idea that, like in New Guinea, I guess they just took forest land and just plowed it down to build runways, right? I mean, there weren't just runways just waiting for
No.
Yeah. Seabees are it's a fascinating thing. So we'll talk about that. The show lasts for about 27 and a half minutes, and it goes a lot faster than you think. And I'll just ask questions, and you and I'll just have a conversation, just much like we're doing right now.
Okay.
So if you can be there about 12:45 on Thursday, day after tomorrow, and we'll just go right through it and get it done, and then it'll actually air. I'm running about a month to 5 weeks ahead, so it'll probably air in July.
Yeah.
Sometime is when it'll actually air.
Well, that's what I told Johnny. I said I didn't know whether we would say anything about the class reunion or not, because I knew that the program wouldn't.
Hadn't happened yet, but it'll do. But we'll talk about it sort of in the past tense.
Like it happened.
But we won't hide anything. We'll say that we're taping this before it actually happens. But because I know that I guess about half the class is still surviving, I guess, or
probably. Well, that's probably about half.
Right.
It's,
right.
I'm down to about 80 people on the mailing list, but there are some that I still consider lost.
Right. Sure.
When their letters start coming back. Then,
how many of those on the mailing list are Bryan or College Station addresses?
Well, I haven't counted that lately, but we.
A good number?
There's a good number. There's I'd have to think about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Out of the original group, there was probably there were probably between 30 and 40 originally were on the Bryan College Station.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a group of about 8 who have been participating in the events we've had over the years.
Right. Right.
I simplified what I said in writing that, because we had a 10-year reunion, and then the lady that organized, I was in Brenham at that time. The lady that organized it in '52. Then she died, and nothing happened in the 15 year, and then I moved over here, and Johnny Lampo and I met one day at a service station and got to talking about it, and he said, well, we ought to have a class reunion.
Right.
So that's when we started it at the 20 year one in '62.
Right.
And then we've had one every 5 years.
Yeah.
And we got together in 2000 because of the turn of the century.
Mm-hmm.
And we got together in 2005 because 90% of us were 80 years old.
Right.
In 2005.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So how old are you?
I'm 82 now.
82 now. Yeah.
And I had one lady called me in. She said she was 84. I knew we had some 83s. I didn't know we had any 2 years old. But in those days, when you flunked, you went took the year over, you know.
Right, exactly.
And
exactly.
occasionally that happened to people.
Exactly. Oh, now I know one thing I haven't talked to you about is your family. I see you've got lots of kids, lots of grandkids, and all that. How many kids do you and
Well, we just
Madeline
have two. We have a son and a daughter, and then we have 3 grandchildren. Our daughter has a boy and girl, and
Right. So those are your 3 grandkids up there.
Reed and Melissa, and then my son David has. They have Andrew.
Now, where do your son and daughter live?
They live here.
Yeah.
They have a place out near Edge. They bought tract out there. What would she say? They've been out there 17 years now. I guess.
Right.
Time does pass. But she works for the Bryan Independent School District.
Your daughter does?
Yeah.
And what's her name?
Sarah.
Sarah?
Yeah. She's a sociologist, and she works with this homeless student. I don't know exactly what they call it, but I know she's still got over 100 Katrina
Oh, is that right? Oh, wow. So
survivors that are going to Bryan schools.
Yeah. And what does your son do?
He has a construction business called Blaco Construction.
I see. And he lives here?
He lives in Bryan. Yeah.
I see.
A lot of remodeling work mostly, but
Right.
occasionally he gets something
Right.
from the ground up.
Yeah. And 3 grandkids. So you got family here. That's great.
Right. Yeah, we're pleased that they're all here.
Yeah.
See the grandkids more often than.
Now, did you have brothers and sisters, or
No, I was an only child.
you were an only child? I see.
My wife had 6 brothers and sisters.
I see.
So I married into
You
a
married-
big, nice family.
That's good. And I want to make sure that I'm saying your last name right. It's Blasienz?
Yes.
Blasienz.
Right.
Okay.
That's been the pronunciation.
Blasienz.
I think in Germany maybe they call it Blasienz. But,
But it's a German name.
it
Blasienz.
is a German
Okay.
name. My daughter always said rhymes with raisins.
That's right. It does.
Like a lot of names that they get pronounced in a lot of different ways.
Oh yeah, you ought to try Turbiville. It gets really knocked around. It really does. Well, good. Well, I will return these to you on Thursday when I meet you at KAMU, and
I'm glad it worked.